"You're too small, but I'll make it fit," the giant mail order bee bride told her trembling shy rancher. "You're too small, but I'll make it fit," that's what the giant bride told her trembling shy rancher on their wedding night, and those 8 words would either destroy him or save them. Both. Delilah Carter stood 6 feet 4 inches tall, a giant bride, who'd been rejected by 5 men who said she was too much woman. Ezra Whitmore stood 5 feet 5 inches, a trembling shy rancher who'd never kissed anyone, never held anyone, convinced no woman would ever want him. But now they were married. Strangers bound by desperate letters and lonelier hearts. The giant bride looked down at her trembling shy rancher and saw him shaking, not from desire, but from terror. Terror that he was too small for her, too weak, too inadequate. Terror that she'd laugh at him the way the whole town already did. But the giant bride wasn't laughing. Instead, she placed her massive hands on his trembling face and whispered those words that would change everything. "You're too small, but I'll make it fit." Was this giant bride talking about their bodies or their broken hearts? Could a trembling shy rancher ever satisfy a woman who'd been told she was too much for any man? And what would happen when the town discovered that the giant bride had chosen the smallest, shyest, most unlikely husband in all of Montana territory? What happened next would shock everyone, including them. But first, you need to understand how a giant bride and a trembling shy rancher learned that size has nothing to do with the capacity to love. The stagecoach disappeared into a cloud of dust, leaving Delilah standing in the Montana sun with a carpetbag at her feet and a trembling man beside her. She could smell the sage, the horses, the nervous sweat rolling off Ezra Whitmore, her husband of exactly 3 hours. He wouldn't look at her. Couldn't, because looking meant acknowledging the impossible reality. His bride towered over him. Her shoulders were broader than his. Her hands could wrap completely around his wrists. She was everything the world said a woman shouldn't be. And he was everything the world said a man must never be. Too small, too shy, too much of a disappointment. Delilah's heart twisted watching him stand there, eyes fixed on the dirt, trying to disappear into himself. She recognized that posture. She'd spent 26 years perfecting it herself, making herself smaller, quieter, less threatening, trying to shrink a body that refused to cooperate. 5 men had rejected her. 5 times she'd been told she was a freak, a mistake, too much woman for any man to handle. The last one, Marcus Dalton, had laughed in her face when she cried, called her a giant, said she'd die alone because no real man would ever want her. That's when she'd answered Ezra's advertisement, not because she believed in love, but because she was tired of being alone, tired of sleeping in her father's cold blacksmith shop, tired of watching couples walk past and wondering what was so wrong with her that she didn't deserve that tenderness. Ezra had written beautiful letters. Shy letters. Letters that talked about loneliness like it was a physical weight he carried every day. Letters that made her think maybe, just maybe, there was someone else in the world who understood what it felt like to be wrong. But he'd never mentioned his height, and she'd never mentioned hers. Now they stood in awkward silence. 2 people who'd lied by omission, both terrified they'd made a catastrophic mistake. "Mr. Whitmore," Delilah said, her voice softer than anyone expected from a woman her size. "You planning to show me the house, or are we sleeping with the chickens tonight?" Ezra flinched like she'd slapped him. Even her gentleness felt like mockery. "Yes, sorry, this way." His voice barely made it past his throat. They walked to the ranch house. Delilah noticed everything. The way Ezra moved, like he was trying to take up no space at all. The way his hands shook. The way he kept an arm's length between them, as if afraid she might accidentally crush him. Inside, the house was small, but painfully clean. Everything organized with military precision. Books lined up by height on the shelf. Dishes stacked perfectly. The home of someone who controlled what little he could, because the rest of the world was chaos. "Your room is upstairs," Ezra said, still not looking at her. "First door. I put fresh sheets on the bed yesterday. There's a wash basin and—" He swallowed hard. I'll sleep in the barn tonight. Give you privacy. Delilah set down her carpetbag with a thud that made Ezra jump. The barn. I assumed you'd want space. I didn't think you'd want... His voice cracked. His face flushed deep red. I didn't think you'd want me in the same house. Something inside Delilah broke open. This small, trembling man had married her, thinking she'd reject him immediately, had already planned his exile to the barn because of course she'd find him inadequate. Of course she'd be disappointed. Of course she'd wish she'd never come. She'd felt that same certainty every day of her life. The bone-deep knowledge that she was too much, too wrong, too impossible to love. Ezra, she said, and hearing his name in her mouth made him finally look up. His eyes were brown, deep, drowning in shame he'd carried so long it had become part of his skeleton. Come here. He didn't move, frozen. Please, she added. And something in her voice, some crack of vulnerability, made him take 3 hesitant steps forward. He had to tilt his head all the way back to see her face. She could see his pulse hammering in his throat. Could see the terror written in every line of his body. Could see him bracing for rejection. Delilah reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away, and cupped his face in her large hands. Her palms covered his cheeks completely. He was so small, so delicate. She could hurt him so easily without even trying. I'm scared too, she whispered. Ezra's eyes went wide. You're scared? Terrified. Her voice cracked. I'm scared I'm too much for you. Too big, too strong, too everything. I'm scared you'll wake up tomorrow and realize you made a mistake. That you'll look at me the way the other 5 did, like I'm something monstrous pretending to be a woman. Ezra stood perfectly still, his mind reeling. This giant woman, this powerful, fierce woman who looked like she could break the world in half, was afraid. Afraid of the exact same thing he was. You're not a monster, he said quietly. Then stronger. You're not a mistake. Neither are you, Delilah said. They stared at each other, giant and small, woman and man. 2 broken people seeing past their own fear for the first time. I won't sleep in the barn, Ezra said suddenly, surprising himself with his own voice. We're married. We should try to act like it. Relief flooded Delilah's face. Yeah, we should try. That evening they ate supper together at Ezra's small table. Venison stew he'd made that morning, bread she'd baked that afternoon. Their knees didn't touch under the table, couldn't with the size difference, but their eyes did. Careful glances, tentative smiles, the beginning of something neither dared name yet. After supper, as the sun set and the inevitable wedding night approached, Delilah saw Ezra's hands start shaking again. Watched the color drain from his face. Saw him calculating all the ways he'd fail her. She stood up, crossed to where he sat, and knelt down so they were eye level. Her knees pressed into the wooden floor. Her hands rested on his trembling ones. Ezra, listen to me. You're too small. She watched his face crumble, watched him start to pull away. She held him tighter. But I'll make it fit. You understand? Whatever happens tonight, whatever happens tomorrow, whatever the world says about us, I'll make it fit. Because that's what people do when they care about each other. They don't give up. They adjust. They find a way. But what if I can't? What if I'm not? He couldn't finish. Shame strangled the words. Then we figure it out together, Delilah said. I don't need you to be bigger, Ezra. I don't need you to be different. I just need you to be here, to try, to not give up on us before we even start. Tears spilled down Ezra's cheeks. No one's ever asked me to just be myself before. Well, I am. Because yourself is the person who wrote me those letters. The person who was honest about being lonely and scared and wanting someone to share this life with. That's the person I came here for. Ezra took a shaking breath, then another. Then he did something that terrified him more than anything he'd ever done. He leaned forward and kissed her. It was clumsy, inexperienced. His lips barely grazed hers before he pulled back, mortified. But Delilah smiled, really smiled, and pulled him back. Like this, she whispered, and kissed him properly. Slowly, gently, teaching him without words that intimacy wasn't about size or strength or meeting some impossible standard. It was about being present, being willing, being brave enough to be vulnerable When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Ezra whispered, "I've never done any of this before." "I know," Delilah said. "That's okay. Neither have I, really. We'll figure it out together." That night they learned each other slowly, carefully. The logistics were complicated, yes. Physics didn't care about feelings. But they discovered that creativity and tenderness could overcome almost anything. That being smaller didn't make Ezra less capable. That being larger didn't make Delilah less feminine. The two people who genuinely wanted to please each other could find ways to fit that had nothing to do with what the world expected. And when they finally fell asleep, tangled together in a bed too small for her and too big for him, both of them felt something they hadn't felt in years: hope. The first month was fragile peace, but the world outside had other plans. In town, people stared, whispered behind their hands. When Delilah walked down the street with Ezra beside her, children pointed. Women clucked their tongues. Men smirked. "Look at that," someone muttered. "Giant and the mouse," Ezra heard it. His jaw tightened. His hands clenched, but he said nothing. Just kept walking, eyes down, shame burning through him like poison. Delilah wanted to scream, wanted to grab those men by their collars and shake them. But she'd learned years ago that her anger only made things worse, made her more monstrous in their eyes. So she stayed quiet too, and the silence between them on the ride home felt like failure. But then came the day everything changed. They were loading supplies when Marcus Dalton rode up, 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, cruel-eyed. The man who'd rejected Delilah. The man who'd called her a freak. "Delilah," Marcus said, his voice dripping false sweetness. "Heard you got desperate enough to marry a child." Delilah's blood went cold. "Leave us alone, Marcus." Marcus dismounted, walked straight to Ezra, looked down at him with naked contempt. "You really think you can handle a woman like her, boy? You really think those little hands can—" Ezra moved before his fear could stop him, stepped between Marcus and Delilah. His voice came out steady, clear, stronger than he'd ever heard it. "Say one more word about my wife, and you'll regret it," Marcus laughed. "You threatening me?" "No," Ezra said quietly. "I'm promising you. Touch her. Insult her again. And I'll make you wish you hadn't." The conviction in his voice, the absolute certainty, made Marcus pause. This trembling, shy rancher wasn't trembling anymore. He was protecting what was his. Marcus stared at Ezra like he'd grown a second head. This tiny man, barely reaching his shoulder, standing firm with clenched fists and fire in his eyes. It was almost laughable. Almost. "You got spine, after all," Marcus sneered. "Too bad spine don't make up for size." He shoved Ezra hard. Ezra stumbled backward, but didn't fall. Didn't run. He straightened up, jaw set, fear screaming through every nerve, but refusing to show it. Delilah's heart hammered. She could end this. One swing. But if she fought Ezra's battles, she'd prove what everyone said, that he needed protecting, that he wasn't man enough, that their marriage was a joke. Marcus raised his fist. Ezra didn't flinch. The punch never landed. Delilah caught Marcus's wrist mid-swing. Her grip was iron. "He told you to leave," she said coldly. "And I'm telling you the same. We're done here." She released him. Marcus stumbled back, fury and humiliation warring on his face. "You two deserve each other. Freak and the runt." He spat in the dirt and rode off. The second he was gone, Ezra's knees buckled. Delilah caught him, held him while he shook with adrenaline and terror and something else. Pride. He'd stood his ground. "Oh, for her, you could have been hurt," Delilah whispered, her voice breaking. "So could you," Ezra said. "And I couldn't just stand there and let him talk about you like that. I couldn't." She pulled back to look at him. This small, shy man who'd faced down someone twice his size because love made him brave. "You're trembling," she said softly. "I know. I'm terrified." He laughed shakily. "But I'd do it again. Every time. For you." Something shifted between them in that moment. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was partnership. This was love. That night, Ezra couldn't sleep. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving behind raw fear. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over. Marcus's fist, his own shaking hands. The certainty that he was going to get hurt, but standing there anyway. Delilah felt him trembling beside her. She turned, wrapped her large arms around his small frame, and pulled him close. "Talk to me." "I was useless," Ezra whispered. "You had to save me again." I stood up to him and still couldn't. "Stop." Delilah's voice was firm. "You think because I stopped the punch you failed? Ezra, you stepped between me and danger. You used your voice when your body couldn't win. That's not weakness. That's courage. But I'm too small to protect you. Protection isn't just physical." She tilted his face up to hers. "You protect my heart every single day. When you hold me and make me feel beautiful instead of monstrous. When you look at me like I'm exactly right instead of too much. That's protection, Ezra. The kind that actually matters." Tears spilled down his cheeks. "I love you." "I didn't plan to. I didn't think I could. But I do. I love you too," Delilah whispered. "My trembling, shy rancher who's braver than any man I've ever met." They held each other as the Montana wind howled outside. Two people who'd been told their whole lives they were wrong, finding rightness in each other's arms. 3 months later, when Delilah discovered she was pregnant, Ezra cried with joy. When the baby came, a healthy girl with her mother's height and her father's gentle eyes, the town whispered. But Ezra and Delilah didn't care anymore. They'd learned something the world refused to understand. Size doesn't measure strength. Height doesn't measure worth. And love doesn't fit into boxes the world tries to build. It just fits. However it needs to. So here's what I want to know. Have you ever been told you're too much or not enough? Too tall, too short, too loud, too quiet, too different? Have you ever loved someone the world said was wrong for you? Drop a comment and tell me your story. And while you're at it, tell me where you're watching from. I want to know how far stories like this travel, because maybe someone out there right now is standing where Delilah and Ezra stood, afraid they'll never fit anywhere. And your story might be exactly what they need to hear. From Montana to wherever you are exactly the right size for the love you deserve. 6 months passed like water over stone, slowly reshaping everything. The ranch thrived under their partnership. Delilah's strength made impossible tasks possible. Ezra's knowledge made the land yield more than it ever had. Together, they were building something neither could have built alone. But the town's judgment hadn't softened. If anything, it had hardened into something uglier, resentment, because Delilah and Ezra's happiness challenged everything those people believed about how the world should work. Then came the day that would change everything. Delilah was at the creek washing clothes. When she heard the scream, high-pitched, terrified, a child's scream, she dropped everything and ran toward the sound. Her long legs covered ground fast. She burst through the trees and saw it. A little boy, maybe 7 years old, trapped on a rock in the middle of the rushing creek. The spring melt had made the water violent, deep, deadly. The boy's mother stood on the bank, hysterical. "Help him! Someone help him! He can't swim!" Other townspeople gathered, but no one moved. The current was too strong, the rocks too slippery. Going in meant risking death. Delilah didn't hesitate. She waded in, her size and strength the only things keeping her upright against the current. The water reached her chest. Her feet slipped on moss-covered stones. But she pushed forward, muscles screaming, lungs burning. She reached the boy, grabbed him, held him tight against her chest, turned to wade back. That's when her foot caught. She went down hard, the current sweeping them both downstream. The boy screamed. Delilah fought to keep his head above water while her own went under. She couldn't breathe, couldn't see, couldn't. Hands grabbed her. Small hands, but strong, determined. Ezra had run into the water downstream, positioning himself where the current would bring them. He'd anchored himself to a tree root and now pulled with everything he had. It shouldn't have worked. He was too small, the current too strong. Physics said it was impossible, but love doesn't follow the rules of physics. Inch by impossible inch, Ezra pulled them to shore. His muscles trembled. His hands bled from gripping the root, but he didn't let go. Wouldn't let go. Not of her. Never of her. They collapsed on the bank, all three of them gasping, alive. The boy's mother ran over, sobbing, pulling her son into her arms. Then she looked at Delilah and Ezra, really looked at them, at the giant woman who'd risked her life, at the small man who'd done the impossible. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you both." Other townspeople gathered around, silent, witnessing. Some looked ashamed, some still looked skeptical, but no one was laughing anymore. That evening, back at the ranch, Delilah and Ezra sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. They held hands, her large one engulfing his small one, and said nothing for a long time. Finally, Ezra spoke. "I thought I'd lost you today. When you went under, I thought—" "But you didn't lose me," Delilah interrupted softly. "You saved me. My trembling shy rancher saved me." "I'm not trembling anymore," Ezra said, and realized it was true. The constant shake in his hands, the fear that had lived in his bones his whole life, it was gone. Not because he'd gotten bigger or stronger or more like other men, but because he'd found something more powerful than fear, purpose, love, someone worth being brave for. "You know what I realized today?" Delilah said. "When I was in that water, the only thing I could think was that I needed to get back to you. Not because you're small and need protecting, but because you're my home. And I'm finally done apologizing for taking up space in this world." Ezra lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it. "Good, because I love how much space you take up. I love every impossible inch of you." They sat together as stars began appearing in the darkening sky. Two people who'd been told they were wrong their entire lives, finally understanding they'd been right all along. They'd just been waiting for each other, for someone who understood that love doesn't measure in inches or pounds or anything the world can quantify. It measures in moments like this, in hands held despite the size difference, in promises kept despite the fear, in choosing each other again and again, no matter what anyone else thinks, because in the end they did make it fit perfectly.